I want to have a detailed look at labeling or annotation in ArchiCAD and perhaps show you a better way to do it, maybe than what you've been using before. And for me, I know it's a better way than what I've been using up until now. What are we talking about? When we're trying to describe surfaces, finishes on building materials of a building, any type, in this case it's a house, what do we do? Do we use a full annotation or a label acronym, and how is that created? How is that referenced? In this case, what I've done previously is I'm using text. It's quite simple, it looks quite clean, and then I have a legend which helps to describe a little bit about what that is, and then of course that needs to be referenced to a material schedule to give more information about what that is. And previously up until now, I've done the material schedule in ArchiCAD as well, but it wasn't referenced and it had limitations in that way. So let's have a look at this, go into the source view. And we see that this is made of text, which means it's manual. There's a system, but it's not automated. It's not also very clear as to what that means if someone didn't have the legend next to it to explain what each of those letters mean. So what's another way? We could use a label tool. Let's just use text, and instead of having this here, this wall here, which is PCF ACR1, what does that mean? What's another way that we could do that? We could click on the label. Let's choose the layer, and for now we'll put this onto a layer called Notes, Finishes tag. The type that I've got doesn't show it as a pointed label, so we'll add in a pointer. And we'll change that text to black. And that pointer that we have there isn't the one that we want, so let's change that to an arrow. We'll make that a bit bigger. Now it's starting to look a little bit like what we want. And we see that it just has here fill type, and there's a hashtag. That hashtag means that it could be set up as Autotext. But because I clicked on something that's not a fill, I clicked on a wall, it didn't give me any information. How do we change that? We don't want the Autotext in this case, we want to type something. So I'm going to select it, or double click inside it. We see that it's blue or grayed. When it's grayed, that means that's Autotext. That's another way we can tell that. We can delete that all in one go. And in this case, I've already written it, so I'm just going to press paste. And you can see that this is a very long string, so let's reduce this down a touch. All right, so if I was going to explain this wall in a full annotation written out completely, what would it say? 155 Dinsel permanent concrete formwork to engineers detail with 75mm Unitex baseboard exterior insulated facade over 35mm galvanized top hats to manufacturer's detail with 5mm rock coat exterior acrylic render, and the color of that render is resin half sea fog. So there's a lot to say, and it's still missing some information. It's still missing quite a bit of information. So that's one method, and that's the traditional method, but I don't think it's the best method. Also, this is the method I had been using, which was basically an acronym, and the acronym was described in the legend, but it was manually done, which meant if I had changed something, it would have to be changed manually. Is there another way? That's what I've been agonizing over for a long time, and there isn't really any fantastically obvious way to do it. I wanted to try to do that using building materials. And so we can see that building materials have a name and an ID. That ID would suggest that we can have an acronym to describe that, but there was no way of labeling the ID, at least without changing a lot of settings in ArchiCAD, which most people won't be comfortable to do. What's another way? Let's have a look at the way that I have now come to. So we're using the label tool, and we're using the text Autotext tool. But to get this look, we want to turn off the pointer. We want to make sure we've got the right size. I'm going to use opaque, just so it's got a white background now, just so it's clear and very easy to read. And I want there to be a frame around it. I like to add a 0.3 margin around my frame, just so it's big enough that we can see it. So we're going to click here again, and we see that it just placed basically the same settings as what I had before, which is normal. Double click inside of this, let's select all of this, Control A, delete, and I want to insert Autotext and element ID add. Let's just do one of these. So currently it says wall-08. Why does it say wall-08? Because when I go into the settings of my wall, down to classification and properties, that's the ID, or the element ID of my wall. Now I could change the element ID of this one wall and make it represent the way that I want it to. What do I want it to say? How am I deriving these acronyms? These acronyms are based on my material schedule that I've created in Excel. Why in Excel? Because I tried doing it in ArchiCAD and it just wasn't working well. So while I use ArchiCAD, while I teach ArchiCAD, I'm not completely sold on the application of ArchiCAD for everything that we do in architecture. So I've broken this up into a legend, and this legend is automatically generated based on the linking of cells in the Excel file. Again, that's something that I really like to do and something that makes a lot of sense that I couldn't get to do in ArchiCAD well, so that's why I'm using Excel. So I've broken this up into structure and systems. So here we see this CPF, which is this permanent concrete formwork that we're talking about. We have exterior cladding and trim, and here we have the EIF, exterior insulated facade, the Unitex baseboard, and then over the top of that is this ACR1, the acrylic render exterior. So what I'm wanting to do is have a system that's made up of CPF, EIF, ACR1. CPF, let's write it here, space EIF, space ACR1. That's the combined acronym that I want to use now for this wall. But I don't want to do every one wall because that would be a waste of time. So how can I do this better? Let's go show all in 3D. This is currently going to show me the way that my model looks in elevation because I chose to show all from my elevation view. And what I want to do is to select something. I want to select these walls, and I want to select all the walls that have this render finish, because I know that if they've got this render finish, that means they're all using that same system. How would I do that? Edit, find and select. What do I want? I want walls, and I need to add in some criteria. Let's add in a criteria for surface. Surface and material surface. We'll click on the wall, and because it's a wall, there's multiple surfaces that it can have. In this case, we want to choose the one that is AD render. Now, when I have selected the wall and the render as my criteria and press plus, that's going to choose all of the walls that are built in this way. Now, when I go into this, I can now go to my classification and properties, down to ID. We're going to paste this here, CPF, EIF, ACR1, just with spaces in between it. I don't need to add a new line. Let's go back to my east elevation. And we see that this label has automatically generated now to what it was before. Now that looks a little bit clumsy because of the space and because of the linear arrangement, but if I grab this edge and stretch it, I get this feedback to explain what I want. Let's go in here and just change this to centered. And now this is representing the way that I want it. I can delete these. I'm not going to use that system anymore. Alt, pick up this new system. That's the new system that I like. Now, depending on how much I want to do this, there's a few ways of thinking about this. I've used a color and I've used a hatch to describe this rendered surface. So therefore, everywhere on this elevation that has the same color and hatch, I might not need to replace it, but every time I have a line, maybe I should replace it. So I'll click here, and the only thing we see that it's not going to do automatically for me in this case is it's not going to wrap the text, so I need to do that manually. But I can now go around all the different elevations and continue to do this same thing. And if I wanted to make any more changes, of course I can do this for all of the other surfaces as well. I can just go back into Show All, do the same thing as before, edit, find and select, pick up all those types of walls, go into the settings, and maybe I wanted to change them all to ACR2. Now it might happen for whatever reason that I need to change the material, change the color, and therefore I don't want to have the drama of having to go through and error check my whole file. This allows all of these to change in one go. So what are we talking about? We're talking about BIM. We're talking about automation. We have a system now that's automated. It's still reliant on other things in this case. It's still reliant on my Excel spreadsheet, but what I will do with this Excel spreadsheet once it's finished is I will drag and drop this information, copy paste it, from Excel into ArchiCAD, which means back on my layouts, I will have the drawing, which will have my label annotation. I'll have a legend down here that describes them. That will reference to the material schedule, and the material schedule down the bottom of this drawing will then describe how it works. In the next video, I'll explain one of this that's finished and show you the whole process, just so it's a little bit clearer with what we're aiming for and what we're trying to achieve.